October 3rd, 1953. The U.S. Navy straps an experimental jet fighter to an engine so catastrophically flawed it would kill 4 pilots and cost the military $200 million. And then they send it screaming across the measured 3-kilometer course at 752 miles per hour to break the world speed record. On a broken engine. That's not exaggeration. That's exactly what happened. The Westinghouse J-40 was a complete disaster. By 1955, the entire program would be canceled, entire fleets of aircraft grounded, and the manufacturer itself would abandon the jet engine business entirely. But before any of that became public, the Navy used it to set a speed record that stunned the world. Think about that for a second. The same engine that would become aviation's most expensive failure was, for one brief moment, the fastest thing on Earth. How does that even happen? The answer starts in 1948, December 16th, to be exact. The Bureau of Aeronautics issues a letter of intent for 2 prototypes of a radical new interceptor. They want something that can climb fast enough to catch Soviet bombers before they reach the carrier group. Ed Heinemann at Douglas Aircraft gets the contract. His design? A tailless delta-wing fighter shaped like a Manta Ray. No horizontal stabilizer, just elevons on the wing trailing edges for control. The Navy designates it the F4D-1, and they want it powered by the new Westinghouse J-40 turbojet. On paper, the J-40 is a beast, compact, powerful. Afterburning thrust that should push the Skyray past Mach 1 with ease. There's just one problem. It was still in early development. Westinghouse promises it will be ready soon. Classic. So Heinemann makes a decision that will save the entire program. He designs the engine bay to fit a 42-inch diameter power plant. The J-40 is only 40 inches wide. Why waste 2 inches of precious fuselage space? Because Ed Heinemann knows better than to trust a prototype engine program. That 2-inch buffer becomes the difference between a recoverable setback and total program failure. January 23rd, 1951. Test pilot Larry Payton takes the first XF4D1 prototype into the sky over Edwards Air Force Base. But it's not carrying a J-40. The engine is still years behind schedule, stuck in development hell. So Douglas straps in a temporary Allison J 35-17 just to get the airframe flying. The Skyray climbs. It turns. It handles like nothing the Navy has ever flown. And it does all of this without the engine it was designed for. If you're seeing a pattern here, you're paying attention. The Skyray would only achieve operational success after completely abandoning the troubled J-40. Subscribe to this channel, and you'll start noticing how often that happens in military aviation. The plane works. The engine doesn't. And somehow the plane gets the blame. March 1949. The Mockup Review. Navy inspectors arrive at Douglas to examine a full-scale wooden model of the fighter. The engineers tilt it to simulate a carrier landing approach, nose high, descending toward an imaginary deck. And that's when they realize the painted carrier deck on the wall has completely vanished beneath the nose. The pilot can't see the ship at all. They have minutes before the inspection team walks in. The crew grabs a saw. They cut off the wooden nose. They fashion a steep downward-sloping canopy top. They reattach everything just in time. The inspectors never know. And that hasty fix becomes a permanent design feature that saves countless pilots from crashing into carrier decks they couldn't see. Panic. Improvisation. Genius. August 1952. Finally, the afterburning J-40 WE-8 passes its 150-hour qualification test. Over 2 years late, Westinghouse delivers the engines. Douglas installs one in the second prototype, and now the Skyray can actually show what it's capable of. September 26, 1953. British test pilot Mike Lithgow flies a Supermarine Swift over the Libyan desert and sets the absolute world speed record at 737.3 miles per hour. Britain just extended its lead. The Navy does not take this well. 2 days later, Lieutenant Commander James B. Verdon climbs into the second XF4D, one prototype at the Salton Sea in California. The plan is simple. Fly 4 passes over a measured 3-kilometer course. Average the speeds. Break the British record under official FAI margin rules. Done. Verdon makes 3 perfect runs. Fast, low, stable. Then on the 4th pass, a momentary loss of thrust. At 100 feet above the desert floor, that's not a minor inconvenience. That's a death sentence if it gets worse. Verdun pulls up early. The average speed comes out to 742.7 miles per hour, faster than the British, but not by enough. The FAI rules are clear: 1% margin or it doesn't count. He just risked his life for nothing. So Verdun demands they go again, tune the engine, set it up. He's going back. 5 days later, October 3rd, he straps in for another attempt. This is what makes the attempt wild. The Salton Sea sits 230 feet below sea level. That means the air is denser. Denser air means more lift from the wings and more thrust from the engine. But it also means more drag. So why fly there? Because at that altitude, in 98-degree desert heat, the local speed of sound increases. The aircraft can achieve a higher true airspeed before reaching the critical Mach number and experiencing drag divergence, which means Verdun can push the jet faster without hitting the drag spike that comes with approaching Mach 1. He flies at 150 feet, 15 stories off the ground, in a tailless Delta jet with a prototype engine that has already malfunctioned once. One engine failure, and there's no time to eject. No altitude to trade for speed. Nothing. Just impact. Verdun makes 4 passes. The J-40 holds together. The average comes back, 752.944 miles per hour, the fastest any human being has ever traveled in level flight. The FAI ratifies it as the new absolute world speed record. Verdun takes the crown back from Britain. The Navy celebrates. Westinghouse celebrates. Douglas celebrates. 13 days later, test pilot Bob Rahn takes the same prototype up over Muroc Dry Lake and sets a 100-kilometer closed-course record at 728.11 miles per hour. 2 world records in 2 weeks. The Skyray is untouchable. The J-40 is vindicated. And then everything falls apart. 1955. The McDonnell F-3H Demon, another jet designed around the J-40, starts crashing. 6 aircraft lost. 4 pilots dead. The engines are failing catastrophically. Compressor stalls, flameouts, structural failures inside the combustion chamber. The Navy grounds the entire Demon fleet. Time magazine calls it a $200 million fiasco. Westinghouse exits the jet engine business entirely. The J-40 program is terminated. Done. Gone. Ed Heinemann built that 42-inch engine bay back in 1948. So when the J-40 collapses, Douglas doesn't panic. They pull the Westinghouse engines. They drop in Pratt & Whitney J57 P8 turbojets. The larger J57 required redesigning the fuselage to fit. The Skyray doesn't miss a beat. April 1956. The production F4D Skyray enters fleet service with Navy Squadron VC-3, powered by the J57. Not the engine it was designed for. Not the engine that set the speed record. A completely different power plant. And it works beautifully. The J57-powered Skyray serves for years. Pilots love it. Fast, agile, responsive. It climbs like an elevator. May 22nd, 1958, Marine Corps Major Edward Lefebvre takes one up from Point Mugu and sets 5 FAI time-to-climb records in a single sortie. He goes from a standing start on the runway to 49,221 feet in 2 minutes and 36 seconds. Outstanding. But nobody remembers those records. They remember October 3rd, 1953. The day a Navy pilot flew a deeply troubled prototype engine to 752 miles per hour and took the world speed record away from the British. That's the story. That's the legend. The fact that the engine was a ticking time bomb, that 4 pilots would die because of it, that the entire program would be written off as one of the worst acquisition disasters in military history, none of that made it into the press release. So was the J-40-powered Speed run a triumph of engineering or a reckless gamble with a doomed technology? The Navy got the record. Westinghouse got the headlines. And 4 F-3H Demon pilots paid the price when the same engine failed underneath them during testing and fleet introduction. Ed Heinemann's 2-inch buffer saved the Skyray, but it couldn't save the Demon. The F-3H was built tight around the J-40. No room for a backup plan. When the engine died, the entire aircraft program nearly died with it. The Demon eventually got re-engined too, but not before the damage was done. The Skyray kept flying until 1964, almost a decade of fleet service. And every single production aircraft carried a Pratt & Whitney engine. The J-40 never made it past the prototype stage in the F4D program, which means the only Skyrays that ever flew with a Westinghouse engine were the two developmental prototypes. One of them set a world record. The other continued in flight testing before being retired. That's it. That was the whole legacy. The surviving prototype, the one Verdun flew, sits in a museum now. Bureau number 12,458,007. The fastest aircraft on Earth for over 22 months, until a North American F-100 Super Sabra broke the record in August 1955. Still powered by a Pratt & Whitney engine, because by then everyone knew the J-40 was finished. And Bob Rahn? The test pilot who flew the Skyray's first flight on a borrowed engine and later set the closed-course record? He also conducted the aircraft's spin recovery tests at Ed Heinemann's request. The aerodynamic team told him to hold full aileron with the spin direction during recovery. Completely counterintuitive. Rahn kicked the jet into a spin at 35,000 feet. It flipped, inverted, flat spin, oscillating. His radio crackled with two words, "Jesus Christ." Then he applied the technique. The Skyray recovered. Rahn lived. The flight test report became doctrine. That's how the Skyray program worked. Improvise, adapt, survive. When the mock-up inspection threatened to expose a fatal visibility flaw, they sawed off the nose and fixed it in minutes. When the designated engine turned out to be a disaster, they swapped in a bigger one. When the spin characteristics looked lethal, they tested the counterintuitive solution and it worked. The F4D succeeded because the team refused to let any single failure kill the program. The J-40 was supposed to power a generation of Navy jets. Instead, it became a cautionary tale. The Skyray was supposed to be a footnote in Cold War interceptor history. Instead, it set multiple world records, served 8 years in the fleet, and became one of the most distinctive aircraft the Navy ever flew. A bat-winged, tailless delta jet that could climb to 50,000 feet in under 3 minutes and land on a carrier deck you could actually see over the nose. If this hit different, take a second to hit like. It genuinely helps the algorithm show this to more people who need to see it, because this pattern keeps repeating. The military bets billions on an unproven technology. The technology fails. The program scrambles to survive. And most of the time, the engineers figure it out anyway. The Skyray lived because Ed Heinemann left extra design margin in 1948. The Demon nearly died because McDonnell didn't. That leaves a question from 1953. Should the Navy have let Verdun fly that record attempt on October 3rd? They already knew the J-40 was struggling with severe developmental problems. They knew the engine program was behind schedule and struggling with reliability. They knew Verdun would be flying at low level in desert heat with zero margin for error. And they sent him anyway. Was it worth it? The record stood for less than a month. The publicity was immense. The geopolitical message was clear. American jets are faster than British jets. The Cold War scoreboard ticked 1 point toward the West. And nobody died that day. But 4 F-3H pilots died later. Same engine. Same fundamental design flaws. The compressor stalls that plagued the Demon fleet were present in the J-40WE-8 from the beginning. Westinghouse just hadn't encountered them yet under the specific flight conditions that would trigger catastrophic failure. Verdun got lucky. The Demon pilots didn't. The Navy knew the risks. They ran the numbers. They made the call. And the Skyray became the fastest aircraft on Earth, powered by an engine that would be completely abandoned and canceled before production Skyrays ever entered fleet service. That's not hindsight. That's not revisionism. That's just what happened. The sole surviving XF4D-1 prototype sits on display at the Naval Museum of Armament and Technology at China Lake, California. Bureau number 124,587. The aircraft that flew 752.944 miles per hour on October 3rd, 1953, and claimed the absolute world speed record for the United States. The very airframe that made history with the Westinghouse J-40 WE-8 engine. An engine that no production military aircraft would ever carry into combat. A masterpiece and a failure frozen in the same airframe. If any of this stuck with you, like and subscribe. There's so much more to uncover. The stories of early jet aviation, the decisions that saved programs, and the ones that killed pilots. The 2 inches of clearance that meant everything. This is aviation history the way it actually happened. Not the press release version, the real one.